Hey everyone, this is Austin. Yeah, I'm doing another video, and I know a lot of you actually wanted me to do this on Twitter and my Discord, and yes, I am going to be covering id Invaded. And before anyone says, isn't it ID? No, it's id, because it actually, if you know anything about psychology, it's a Freudian thing, or Sigmund Freud actually made the id, superego, and ego kind of thing. So yeah, I really like psychology, so this is going to be a very fun experience for me. But anyways, so I'll cover my first impressions towards the end of the video with everything, just get through the review and kind of throw in input. This is obviously an anime original, so I love it. So Koharu got kissed by the missing person, and we kind of see that the guy with the drill, well, that did the whole thing, kind of talks about how everyone that he drilled in the head isn't the same kind of person, and which is true. Koharu starts to, think that, if he was there, he obviously is the gravedigger, and he wants to see the copycat, and which that is normal, honestly, to, I guess, going too deep into psychology, because, they kind of want to see how their work affected someone else, and we see kind of a thinking process of, Koharu talking about how the kiss was a way for, the guy to lose her, and so he can kind of escape without being caught, and we see that the gravedigger has 6 victims, and it's really weird that there's no way that they couldn't detect any drive to kill. And we see that Koharu talks about how she thinks that his neuro pathways kind of have been rerouted, so his expressions of love are the same as, the urge to kill, and they're kind of just swapped. And it's likely because of the brain damage he suffered. And, it's interesting that they go through this kind of theory, and I mean, it's amazing how durable and amazing how the brain works, but nonetheless, I'll get a little into that a little later. But they go back to the scene, and they actually pick up a cognition particles, and I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. And when he gets this is the theory, the urge to kill, it shows as a sign of affection, and if he puts his mind to it, he can actually go through with the deed. And he just kind of acts on impulse, which is kind of interesting, but that's impulses versus desires. And that's something I'll talk about a little bit more in depth later, but his thoughts of love are kind of thoughts of, doing that to someone. But nonetheless, we see the man, the legend, Sakato, diving into the id well, which I thoroughly love the name of it, because it's the cognition, or the cognitive, or what's going on within the brain, and kind of in the deep conscience of it, everything what's going on. And he actually spots a house on an isolated piece of land, and he actually enters the whole house and spots Cairo, of course, again, dead on the ground. And I think this is actually her theory to what she is. She is a cognitive trigger, and this is something to help recall stuff and kind of, get your memories back, which, does help him kind of remember who he is. It kind of makes everything faster. And this is actually a very interesting thing about psychology, that some people do have cues that they have to look at to remember a certain memory. I mean, that's if you listen to a certain song or look at a certain photo, you'll have memories flood back. But nonetheless, we see Sakato, he finds out the cause of death pretty fast, and it was a stab to the chest, and the weapon is missing. The blood is off too, he notices, due to being in a weightless environment, so it would have splattered everywhere. But he kind of pieces it together that she was stabbed mid-air, and the question is, why is she mid-air? That was the biggest thing, like, why? And he looks under, and we find a girl, and this girl isn't just one person, it's a pattern of all the victims from the gravedigger, which is really interesting to say the least. And yeah, it gets crazier and crazier, and this all makes sense because this guy does have issues, and he had a brain injury, so he's trying to categorize all his victims into one. And the coolest thing about the brain is, if you ever suffer a brain injury, the non-working parts of your brain, the functions will shift to the other side of the brain. I forgot the actual term for that, but if you are curious about that, you can always look up the story about the guy that got a railway spike in his head, and he still is living. But that's just kind of the cool thing about the brain. It functions on one side, can't function on one side, they'll go to the other side. And I really honestly think it's cool. But nonetheless, we see that they now have the address to, find where these bodies are. And we see the squad just rolls out to go over there. And I just love kind of how this is a different branch of, well, it's not police per se, but it's like their own kind of special unit. I'm going to learn a little bit more on that one, because we kind of just get like little pieces and there's nothing like source material. So that's one thing I want to figure out, because it's still on edge and still, I just want information. But nonetheless, we see Saikaido kind of just ask the girl, what she's doing down there. And basically he thinks that the killer is trying to hide the victim from being found. And the girl obviously goes and says, I'm hiding from a scary monster. And question is, what's the monster? And he goes and asks, hey, what do you mean, kind of thing. And the man that would know anything about who was just killed is out fighting the monster. And we get back to the monster. What? After all this, Saikaido finds a photograph of looking for something to defend himself, and it's actually a photo from middle school, and it has all his friends in there. Well, not Saikaido's, but the killer's friends. And this is the most interesting thing, because we come back to the whole concept. The photo probably contains the people that he longs for, so that might be their next victim. And this is kind of just how crazy the brain is, because a littlest injury can cause stuff to shift and completely alter a personality. It is very, very crazy how brain injuries can change an entire person to the fact that you would never know who they are after. But nonetheless, we kind of just come to the conclusion that the drill guy basically created another killer. And we see the officers actually arrive to the house, and there's still no reading. And I'm just going to say, poor officers. And I'm going to skip around a little bit here, kind of talk about right here what happened. They go into the house, they find barrels, and there's still no readings. And we kind of just get this whole thing of, they're in the house of dead bodies, and they cut off the power, and sadly, it was a trap, and it was all set to rig because gasoline fell and the entire squad was wiped out, or we don't know if they're actually all dead. But going back to, a little bit outside the Idwell, we have, Koharu actually visiting one of the females in the photos, and they plan on questioning her about everything. And that's when everything gets really fascinating in this episode. And I don't mind, Saikaido being put in the back burner for a little bit. He had his moments, and he's pretty good, honestly. I much rather have him all the time. But nonetheless, we go back to the Idwell, and we see, good old John Walker out there. And I have a crazy theory, but I'm going to wait until the end of the whole thing, this whole review on who John Walker is. But, we see Saikaido just kind of freak out seeing John Walker. And if you don't know, John Doe is just a random name given to people. So the whole John first part, I'm still confused on, but I'm pretty sure Walker is just its own unique kind of handle to it. And I'm still on the, side of, is it just the thought of doing the deed, or is it an actual person? But Saikaido charges him, and, he obviously wants to get revenge because he thinks John Walker is responsible for what happened to his wife and kid. And, of course, John Walker evades it and just completely goes away. And I'm just like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting what's going on. And now we get to the interesting part of how Koharu goes to the house and starts questioning the female. And I'm going to be honest, when I was watching this, I'm like, my gut's telling me something's off. And little did I know I was quite right. But a little before we get into that poor squad just like completely wiped out because of misjudgment, I guess. And, they did tell them, be careful. And this is kind of the crazy stuff. And I mean, thinking like, what would the good old gravedigger do? That's the smart way to do it, to get rid of the bodies, I guess. But still not the smartest thing. But nonetheless, continue on. We get to, the girl. And this girl, at first, honestly, was acting really, really weird, to the point that it just, as I said, kind of put me off. And she knows a whole lot about Kazuto. And how basically he wasn't really interested in dating, and she starts to kind of throw the trail off by saying they really weren't friends. And we have Koharu kind of just point out, you don't go out of your way if you don't have feelings for someone to figure out their relationship status and know all about them. And that is true. And yeah, this girl is just honestly bona fide creepy, and it kind of just put me off to like, she is involved in this, and there's definitely 100% something going on. And little did I know, good old Koharu eggs her on and causes her to, go all crazy, to say the least. Well, not crazy, but kind of like they find the whole person that's behind the whole thing. And basically, as dark and creepy this is, we see that she is the one that's telling Kazuto to basically have sacrifices for her. And this now completely turns every theory that we heard in the entire episode around, and it makes sense because of the Idwell. The Idwell was, him trying to protect the victim, and the victim kind of looks like that girl in a sense. Basically, she is the sole reason that she's probably basically brainwashed into thinking that he needs to do this kind of stuff. And this is a scary thing because in relationships that kind of does happen, and I'd say abusive relationships, that they convince the partner that they're wrong, that they need to do everything they want. And it's quite interesting, to say the least. But nonetheless, first impressions of this entire series, it's honestly very good and interesting. I like that it's anime original. And to the Mr. Walker thing, quite simple and everything. I think Mr. Walker is it's Sakaido. Just a whole another personality of who he is. And as we can see, that Sakaido has multiple personalities. He's a great detective. He is his normal self, and Mr. Walker wouldn't be far out there. And it's just interesting to see what's going to unravel. And hey, they've been working on this series for 8 years. It's pretty good so far. But nonetheless, guys, thank you for watching. I'm actually kind of happy covering this because I get to talk about psychology. I love psychology. But yeah, I might make a entire series on explain the psychology behind everything in this, but that's for a later date. But anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next review, which is probably Wednesday. Peace.